In a world where souls seek answers, where the noise of the everyday drowns out the whispers of the divine, there exists a forgotten power, a lost key buried among the ruins of time. God First, the forgotten secret of spiritual power, is not just a text. It is a calling, an awakening. This work opens the doors to an ancient wisdom that has been patiently waiting to be rediscovered. Within its pages, and now, within your inner voice, echoes a simple yet transformative truth. When we place God first, everything else falls into place. Prepare to embark on an intimate and powerful journey, one that will not only change the way you see the world, but the way you live within it. This is not magic, this is not religion. It is the creative force of the universe, accessible here and now, because the secret was never far. It was only waiting for you to remember, and now you have. Welcome to the revelation, welcome to God First. It begins now. The law the world has forgotten, why putting God first changes everything. The modern world, with its incessant agitation, its preoccupation with time, its cult of efficiency, and its obsession with immediate results, has forgotten a simple truth known by the wise of all ages. God must come first. Not as a pious idea, not as a Sunday habit, not as a religious concept learned in childhood, but as a living spiritual law. A law as precise as gravity, as inevitable as the dawn. And like any law, it is not negotiable. It is either obeyed or its consequences are suffered. When I speak of God, I am not referring to an anthropomorphic figure residing in some corner of the universe, nor to a dogma, nor to a cultural image. I am referring to the absolute presence, divine intelligence, the principle of all good, that which is the cause, the origin, the source, and the substance of all that is real. Putting God first means aligning with the cause before seeking effects. It means seeking the kingdom before the bread, the truth before the appearance, peace before the visible solution. This is not babbling mysticism. It is concrete spiritual practice. When a person puts God first in thought, intention, desire, and action, disorder begins to resolve. The mind clears, the body strengthens, relationships are pacified, sustenance arrives, not through miraculous intervention outside the law, but because inner order produces outer harmony. Jesus taught this law directly and unambiguously. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. He did not say, first occupy yourself with the problems, and then think about God. He did not say, fix the circumstances and then have time for the Spirit. He said first. And in that first is the key that transforms a fragmented life into a centered, full, and guided life. The world, and I say this with full awareness, has inverted the order. People chase after money and then ask for peace. They seek success and then beg for meaning. They reap disharmony, but have not sown what is essential. That is why there is so much anguish, so much fatigue, so much spiritual disease. God first is not a decorative phrase. It is a structure of consciousness. It is a way of thinking, of breathing, of deciding. It is living knowing that the source is always present, that the Spirit has never been absent, and that true security does not come from things but from constant communion with the principle. Putting God first does not require additional time. It requires reorientation. It requires ceasing to act as if the urgent is more important than the eternal. It requires thinking from above, not from below. This book does not intend to teach you something new. It intends to remind you of what your soul already knows, that everything you seek, health, provision, direction, rest, clarity, love, cannot be achieved by running faster, but by stopping to recognize the presence, the only presence, and allowing it to take its rightful place, the center, the principle, the first thought. Everything that does not flow in your life has, in some form, lost its axis. And to return to the axis, return to God. And returning to God is nothing more than returning to yourself, to your true identity, to your true cause. This book is written as a map. Each chapter is a door to divine order. It will not ask for sacrifices. It will ask for alignment. It will not impose rules. It will remind you of laws. And it will not require blindness, but will offer understanding. Because when you understand that putting God first is not renouncing the world, but ordering it from its true source, then you no longer doubt. You no longer run. You no longer beg. You simply align and receive in peace, in joy, and fullness as it was always meant to be. This is the forgotten secret, the key hidden in plain sight, the simple principle that never fails. God first, and the rest is added. God First, The Forgotten Secret of Spiritual Power by Emmet Fox. We've noticed that more than 80% of those who visit our channel are not subscribed. You can support this project by pressing the subscribe button and liking the video. Thank you for inspiring us to continue creating more and better content for you. Are you ready to transform your life? Chapter 1. God is Order, the spiritual cause behind human chaos. The universe is not chaotic. Life is not random. The mind of God is not confusion. Everything that is real in this world is sustained by a law of perfect, silent, invisible, yet inviolable order. When we observe the course of the stars, the precision of the seasons, the balance of nature, even the design of a living cell, we see an intelligence that does not improvise, that does not err, that does not forget. That intelligence, that essential harmony is the trace of the principle. And that principle is God. God is order, not disorder, not chance, not chaos disguised as mystery. When the human soul forgets this, it goes astray. It begins to live from a divided, fragmented, misaligned consciousness. It believes it can act on impulse, on fear, on habit, and that the consequences will be fortuitous, but they are not. Nothing in spiritual law is fortuitous. Everything is linked to cause and effect. When God is put first, the cause of order is activated. When he is placed last or excluded, one enters the domain of disorder. Human chaos, then, is not a divine punishment nor a test imposed from above. It is the natural result of thinking and acting disconnected from the source. A sustained wrong thought produces an unbalanced experience. A life based on the separate self, on the ego that seeks to control everything, inevitably generates confusion, anxiety, and suffering. Disorder is not outside. It is in the mind and is reflected in circumstances. The world we see is always the reflection of the order or chaos in which we hold our consciousness. That is why Jesus did not come to impose religions. He came to reveal the kingdom. And that kingdom was not a geographical place, but a consciousness ordered by God. When he said, "Seek first the kingdom," he was not speaking of heaven after death, but of putting God first here and now, in thought, in the heart, in intention, and everything else, he said, will be added to you. Why? Because spiritual order establishes the other things in their place. Nothing healthy can be built on a crooked foundation. Nothing true can come from a mind in conflict with itself. That is why when a person seeks peace, health, abundance, or a way, but does not start with God, they run without moving, they tire without advancing, they try to organize the effects, but have not touched the cause. God is the cause of order, and only by aligning with that cause can harmony come. Many ask why their lives seem like an endless confusion, despite the sincere efforts they make. The answer is not in the effort, but in the axis. What is the axis of your life? From where do you think, decide, feel, speak? If that axis is fear, appearance, habit, or selfish desire, then no matter how much effort you put in, the result will be unstable. But if the axis is God, truth, presence, impersonal love, then even the loose pieces begin to fit together. Even what seemed impossible falls into place, even the storm becomes a path. This is the great spiritual teaching that the world has forgotten. Order is not imposed from outside, it is restored from within, and it is only restored when we allow God to take his place. The first place. Some people try to order their emotions with willpower, their health with diet, their relationships with logic, their economy with strategy. And although all of that may have value, if it does not begin from the spiritual center, it collapses. If it is not rooted in God, it crumbles. If it does not arise from the eternal order, it cannot stand the test of time. The cause of human chaos, then, is not evil, ignorance, or weakness. It is forgetfulness. The forgetfulness of presence, the forgetfulness of the essential, the forgetfulness of true order. And the solution, therefore, is not more effort or more control. It is more surrender, more silence, more spiritual priority. It is returning to the axis, returning to the principle, returning to God, not as belief, but as inner order, as the living cause, as the first thought that directs all others. Try it. Take a situation in your life that today seems in chaos. Do not rush to fix it. Do not react. Go within. Remember that God is order. Declare with faith, "This matter has no power in itself. The only power is God, and God is order. I allow this order to be established in my mind, and the rest will align and remain. Do not ask, do not negotiate, allow, and you will see how the order that seemed impossible from the human perspective begins to emerge like a flower in the desert, because the desert was never stronger than the seed, and the seed has always been God. Chapter 2. First, the invisible, the mistake of seeking results without aligning consciousness. We live in a world that worships results. We want to see changes, improvements, achievements, healings, visible manifestations that confirm that something is working, and there is nothing wrong with desiring fruits. It is natural for the tree to bear fruit, but what has been forgotten and must be urgently remembered is that the fruit can never come before the root. The visible never precedes the invisible, and the soul that seeks to change the effect without attending to the spiritual cause is building on sand. The invisible comes first. The invisible is more real than the visible. Thought precedes action. The mental image precedes form. Consciousness directs the body. Consciousness opens the way before the feet walk it. This is a universal law. It is inviolable, and whoever forgets it suffers confusion. The great mistake of the world has been to rush toward results, but with the consciousness misaligned. Healing is sought without faith, abundance without gratitude, love without inner purification. Peace is desired without renouncing judgment, and success is pursued with a heart full of fear. That is wanting the fruit without planting the seed. It is like watering the surface expecting roots, and when there is no result, because there cannot be one, the soul becomes frustrated, hardens, and moves farther away from spiritual order. Jesus taught with perfect clarity. The kingdom of God does not come with external warning. The kingdom of God is within you. What does this mean, if not that everything that matters, everything that transforms, everything that heals and prospers, begins in the invisible, in the depths, in consciousness? True prayer is not a plea outward, but a correction inward. It is not about asking for what is missing, but about aligning with the fullness already present. But that fullness is not in the world. It is in God. And God dwells in the invisible, in silence, in stillness, in the surrender of thought. The human mind, programmed by the urgency of the world, wants quick, measurable, tangible results. But the spirit does not respond to haste. It responds to alignment, not to emotion, but to frequency. And that frequency is what determines form. When consciousness is disordered, the external world will inevitably reflect it, not because it is punishment, but because it is law. And when consciousness is centered, elevated, surrendered, then sometimes without external effort, what seemed impossible falls into place by itself. That is why Jesus said, "Do not worry, look at the lilies of the field. Seek first the kingdom, and all the rest will be given to you." What the world calls addition, money, health, relationships, opportunities, is not obtained by fighting against the visible. It is allowed by putting the invisible first. The root of all good is in consciousness, and putting God first is putting divine consciousness as the organizing principle of your whole life, not seeking outside but correcting within, not struggling with the outside but aligning with the presence that already knows how to resolve everything. Try it. Instead of rushing toward the external solution, stop. Close your eyes and declare, "I am not alone. The Spirit of God dwells in me." And before seeking the effect, I join with the cause. Before touching the form, I surrender to the source. Before acting, I align. And wait. Wait with faith. Wait with peace. And you will see how the invisible, when honored as first, begins to order the visible without friction. This is not magic. It is not superstition. It is law. The law of the Spirit, the law of order, the law of the One. And everything the soul needs, everything it has sought for years in the world, everything it has pursued externally, begins to manifest effortlessly when it finally remembers that the first is not what is seen, but what is. And what is in God is already complete. Chapter 3. The King of All Good, Why God Does Not Compete or Negotiate. He only waits for priority. God does not argue. God does not plead for your attention. God does not impose himself. The Spirit does not compete with the voices of the world. It does not stand in line to see if it's its turn. God is, and by being remains in silent immutability, waiting to be recognized as what he is, the root of all good. The human soul, in its illusion of separation, has made God just another option among its priorities: work, family, finances, health, and even space for God. But the principle does not operate under these conditions. It cannot operate unless it is first, because spiritual order does not tolerate inversion, not because it is whimsical, but because that is its nature. God is cause, not effect. He is center, not addition. He is root, not result. Putting God last and expecting the fruits of the Spirit is like placing the foundation at the end of the construction. It is like wanting to harvest without planting. It is to invert the law and then complain that goodness does not flow. But goodness cannot spring forth if its root has been denied, ignored, or displaced. God does not curse for being forgotten. He does not punish. He simply does not act where he has not been given place, because his power is order, not imposition. When the soul places anything else above God, whether it be fear, desire, duty, logic, or ambition, it begins to live from the world, not from the principle. And the world, with all its variability, duality, and changes, cannot sustain true peace or true provision. The visible is fleeting, the temporary moves. Only the eternal remains, and the eternal is God when he occupies the first place in consciousness. This is a simple yet powerful truth. God does not need to compete because there is no other real power. But the human mind, entangled in its worries, lives as if there were multiple powers: economy, disease, time, other people's opinions, personal history. And so by paying more attention to these other powers, the soul gives them its creative energy and strengthens the illusion. But the day the soul decides to return to God, not as an idea but as the axis, that day the chaos begins to recede because the cause has been restored, and where the cause is recognized, the true effect flows without obstacles. Putting God first is not doing something for him. It is recognizing that without him, there is no real life, and therefore it makes no sense to negotiate with the illusory. It is not about leaving space for the spiritual. It is about living from the spiritual as the only reality, and allowing everything else to grow from that root with order and abundance. It is easy to know if God has been put first. The sign is not in the words or external customs, it is in the inner peace. Because when God occupies his place in consciousness, the mind rests, the heart calms, and life flows with direction. Many ask, why don't I see results if I am praying, affirming, and acting correctly? And the answer is often this: because God has not yet been put first. Perhaps prayer has been used as a last resort. Perhaps the mind remains divided between trust in the truth and fear of the world. Perhaps good is desired, but there is still fear of loss. And as long as there is division, there is no full manifestation, because the law responds to the unified mind, not to the heart that doubts between two masters. Jesus said it clearly: no one can serve two masters. And serving, in spiritual language, means giving priority in thought. Who occupies your first thought upon waking? From where do you make your decisions? Who guides your attention when fear arises? Answering these questions honestly reveals the true inner order, and that order is what determines whether the good flows or is delayed. But the good news is that God does not withdraw, does not take offense, does not disappear. He remains as the root beneath the earth, waiting to be watered, as the sun behind the clouds, waiting to be seen, as the source at the top of the mountain, waiting for someone to turn their face toward it. And when he is recognized as first, the entire soul begins to blossom, without struggle, without anxiety, without fragmentation, because the root is in its place, and when the root is well planted, the fruit does not take long to appear. Chapter 4. The Kingdom Before the Bread, how Jesus taught the law of priority in every word. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Matthew 4:4. In this simple statement spoken in the desert, Jesus reveals a law that the world has forgotten. True life does not come from the material, but from the spiritual. It is not about rejecting bread, but understanding that bread without the kingdom is insufficient, that food without direction, abundance without purpose, success without truth does not sustain the soul nor transform life. From the beginning of his ministry, Jesus taught, embodied, and demonstrated the law of spiritual priority. Every gesture, every parable, every decision pointed to a consciousness centered on God first, not as an accessory, not as a refuge in difficult times, but as the foundation, the center, the starting point of all true action. When he was tempted in the desert with the most basic thing, turning stones into bread, his response was clear and firm. Man shall not live by bread alone. In other words, order matters. The soul must not be subordinated to matter. Consciousness cannot revolve around form. First the kingdom, then the bread. First God, then everything else. Jesus did not teach this as a religious demand. He lived it as a natural law. He demonstrated it in every situation. When the crowd followed him with physical hunger, he multiplied the bread, but only after thanking God first. When they called him teacher, he did not take personal glory, but said, "The Father who dwells in me, he does the works." When asked for signs, he said, "This generation seeks signs, but the kingdom does not come with outward signs, it is within you." Every word of his was a return to the invisible as cause, to the eternal as foundation, to the divine as the absolute priority. And so he lived, without worry, without anxiety for tomorrow, without the need to defend himself or prove anything. For whoever puts the kingdom first knows that everything necessary will manifest by law. That is why he taught, "Do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat or what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing?" And he crowned that teaching with the phrase that he would engrave deeply in the heart, "Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." This is not a poetic invitation. It is an exact spiritual formula. Seek first the kingdom, that is, the living presence of God in consciousness, and the rest you will not have to chase. It will come, it will be ordered, it will flow toward you as light does when you open a window. But when bread is sought first, when one runs after results, external security, immediate solutions, the soul becomes divided, and internal division leads to external confusion, because the law cannot be inverted. Consciousness determines experience, and if consciousness has forgotten God, then even bread loses its love. Jesus did not teach to ignore human needs, he acknowledged them, but he subordinated them to a greater truth, that the soul aligned with God lacks nothing, that life, directed from above, finds answers below, and that every true addition is the natural echo of a consciousness centered on the essential. Do you want peace? Seek first the kingdom. Do you want clarity? Seek first the kingdom. Do you want sustenance, health, direction, harmony? Seek first the kingdom, not as a last resort, but as the first movement. Before you speak, remember God. Before you decide, return to the center. Before you resolve, quiet the mind, and say, "My priority is the kingdom, and in it, everything is contained. Nothing is lacking, nothing is excessive. Everything flows in perfect order." Jesus did not come to give you external recipes. He came to reveal to you the internal structure of the universe. And that structure begins like this: God first, kingdom first, consciousness first, and then everything else manifests, not through struggle, not by chance, but by law. And that law, which never fails, only waits for you to remember its principle. For when the kingdom is your cause, the bread will be your effect, and you will never again live from fear, because you will know that you are already within the kingdom, and the kingdom is within you. Chapter 5. Your mind as an altar, thinking of God. First is creating from the eternal. There is no need to climb a mountain or enter a stone temple to find God. The true altar is the mind, the sacred place where it is decided every day, every hour, every moment, who will be the priority. And although the lips may say God first, life does not change until the thought also says it. Thought is creative, it is seed, it is cause, it is a silent decree that shapes form, and what is thought first becomes the root of what will be lived. That is why when we say that God must come first, we are not talking about an external act, but about a constant mental attitude. Thinking of God first is not a spiritual slogan, it is a technology of the soul. It is activating the higher consciousness that directs everything, harmonizes it, and provides it. Your mind is the point of union between heaven and earth. It is the space where eternal ideas are translated into visible forms, and what occupies the first thought of your day, your decision, your action, is your true God. And that is why Jesus said, "Love the Lord your God with all your mind." Do not share it with what is left over, but with the full content of your consciousness, with the thought that rises and the one that lies down, with the internal image you hold when no one sees you, with the belief that lives beneath all your words, because it is there where you are truly worshipping. The mind as an altar is not a beautiful metaphor, it is a living truth. And that altar can be consecrated to the spirit or contaminated by fear, judgment, doubt, attachment to appearances, but it is never empty. There is always a presence at the altar. The question is, who dwells there? If the first thought upon waking is worry, that day is built from lack. If the first feeling when making a decision is fear, the path is clouded before it even begins. But if the soul has learned to stop, to remember to place God as the first thought, as the light that illuminates the mind before acting, then it is living from the eternal and not from the passing. Thinking of God is not repeating his name, it is tuning into his nature. It is thinking in order because God is order. It is thinking in peace because God is peace. It is thinking in love because God is love. It is refusing to think with fear, guilt, or anger because that would profane the altar. And the altar is made for the sacred. Every time you choose to see with the eyes of the Spirit, even if the world screams the opposite, you are sanctifying your mind. You are telling life, I will not be guided by appearances. I will not surrender to chaos. I will not forget the source. I will think of God first, and from there I will create whatever is necessary. And the law responds, for where God is the cause, the effect is always good. Where God is the first thought, the form cannot contain error, because the eternal cannot generate the false, and what is born from the Spirit cannot fail. The directed mind is not a mind without thoughts. It is a mind that is directed. A thought may arise, fear, doubt, ancient memory, but it does not stay because the altar already has an owner, and that owner is the truth. The work then is not to struggle against passing thoughts, but to remember which one is first, which one must be above all others, which one sustains, orders, and illuminates. And that is God. Make it a habit. Upon waking, before checking the external world, place a thought of God in your mind, not as a formula, but as alignment. Say, there is only one presence, one mind, one law, one source, and I align myself with it now. And from there, live your day. Do your tasks, make your decisions, rest, but knowing that you do so from the altar, from the first thought, from the eternal center that never moves. For when God dwells in your mind as the cause, the whole life becomes a sanctuary. And everything else, the bread, the time, the health, the path, becomes ordered effortlessly because the eternal is already creating in you. Chapter 6. Whom do you serve? What happens when money, fear, or the ego take first place? No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other. You cannot serve God and wealth. Jesus of Nazareth. The question is not whether you serve or not. The real question is, whom are you serving? Because every constant thought, every repeated intention, every motive that occupies the center of your consciousness is a lit altar. And where attention is placed with reverence, there you are serving. Jesus was not speaking abstractly when he said, you cannot serve two masters. He was describing a precise mental law. A divided mind cannot create with power. A consciousness that tries to sustain the spirit while at the same time worshipping fear, money, or the ego will eventually collapse. Because the law does not respond to confusion. The law responds to clarity, decision, and priority. And that priority is demonstrated not with words but with mental actions. Where is your thought when the day begins? From where are your decisions made? With what criteria do you evaluate your steps? From the fear of losing or from trust in the source? When money takes first place, everything becomes a transaction. Relationships become contaminated, vocation is prostituted, and the soul becomes tense. Not because money is bad, but because it is not God. And what is not God cannot occupy his throne. When fear takes first place, actions become smaller, vision becomes clouded, and life becomes constant tension. The soul becomes obsessed with what might go wrong and forgets all that is already right. Fear is a poor master, and serving it means losing the inheritance of freedom. When the ego takes first place, there is no room for life. Everything revolves around image, control, appearance. And though it may look like success from the outside, inside there is disorder because the ego is a tyrant, not a teacher. It is noise, not truth. Every time any of these false masters, money, fear, or ego, are prioritized, the soul is placed in a vibration that prevents the manifestation of true good. It is not punishment. It is cause and effect. For where thought revolves around the illusory, the resulting experience will be unstable, fragile, and fleeting. But when you serve God, that is, when you think, decide, and act from presence, truth, and love, the whole life begins to flow with order. Serving God does not mean renouncing the world. It means placing the Spirit as the cause of all things. You do not reject money, you use it as an instrument of good. You do not deny your emotions, you observe them from the higher consciousness. You do not destroy your personality, you purify it so it reflects the Christ within. The priority then is not a theory. It is an internal lesson, a deep surrender that says, I do not want to divide my mind. I do not want to keep seeking outside what only God can give. I choose to serve the one true power, the one true good, the one true cause, and that service is not burdensome. It is not sacrifice, it is rest. For serving God is returning to the center, remembering the essential, and allowing everything else to be ordered as a reflection. Do the exercise in everything you do today. Ask quietly, whom am I serving in this moment? The rush, the fear, the comparison, the desire for approval, the illusion of control. And if you discover that you are not serving the Spirit, do not blame yourself. Just return to the center, correct the cause, and everything else, as always, will be added. Because no life can flourish serving two masters, but every soul becomes powerful when it serves only one, God first. Chapter 7. The prayer that orders life, your will be done, is not surrender, it's activation. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Jesus of Nazareth. These words, which have been repeated by generations without ceasing, are not a common prayer, nor a formula for emotional comfort, nor a religious ritual. They are a vibrational code, a mental architecture, a spiritual technology that, if understood and used with full consciousness, has the power to reorder all of life. When Jesus taught this prayer, he did not do so as a recitation to be mechanically repeated. He did it as an eternal key. Especially these three words, which are often pronounced with resignation, but are actually a statement of spiritual authority. Your will be done. The sleeping soul interprets this phrase as submission, as defeat, as if saying, I can do nothing, let whatever God wants happen. But that is not the Spirit of Christ. Jesus never taught passivity disguised as faith. When he said, Your will be done, he spoke from the power of one who is already aligned with the divine cause, and, in pronouncing that phrase, is activating the higher law that orders all that is below. God's will is not something that happens against you. It is something that happens through you when you surrender to the highest order. It is not imposition. It is intelligence. It is not punishment. It is precision. It is not resignation. It is conscious cooperation with good. When you say with full consciousness, your will be done, you are saying that the perfect order of the Spirit is now activated in this matter, that my lower self steps aside so that infinite wisdom can act without resistance, that what my limited mind does not understand is guided by the divine mind that already sees the whole. And this inner disposition does not generate weakness, it generates direction, it produces clarity. It opens paths where there were none, because the soul stops fighting against life and begins to flow with the law. This prayer orders your mind. It places God first. It reminds you that you are not alone and not obligated to carry the world on your shoulders. It shows you that there is a will that is not whimsical or distant, but is intimately connected to your highest good and knows how, when, and in what form to act. Your will be done does not annul your desire. It purifies it, elevates it, and places it in the eternal context so that it is fulfilled, not from anxiety, but from harmony. Desire aligned with God ceases to be demand and becomes a channel, and everything that is a channel flows without friction, without guilt, without fear. This is why Jesus prayed this way before every important step, not because he didn't know what to do, but because he knew perfectly well that no lasting result can arise without that alignment. In Gethsemane, in the most human moment of his journey, when the shadow of pain seemed inevitable, he did not flee or resist. He said, "Not my will, but yours be done." And with those words, he did not renounce his power. He consolidated it because he understood that the highest power is not to impose the form, but to surrender control to the love that already knows the purpose. This is the daily practice that transforms life. Before acting, say, "Your will be done in me." in this relationship, in this problem, in this body, on this day, and then act from that peace, not from urgency, not from need, but from the certainty that by allowing God to be first, everything will naturally fall into place. The soul that has understood this prayer no longer fears the future, no longer wears itself out correcting the external, no longer asks for things. It asks for alignment, because it knows that when consciousness is in order, life will be as well. Your will be done is a key that opens the door to the kingdom, and when the kingdom enters, the bread, health, peace, and direction come effortlessly. Not because they have been demanded, but because the essential has been remembered, and the essential has always been this. It is not the world that orders God. It is God who, when placed first, orders the whole world. Chapter 8, Mental Peace, the first fruit of a God-centered consciousness. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. Jesus of Nazareth. The human mind believes that peace is the result of external conditions, that it will come when there are no problems, when debts are resolved, when conflict disappears, when others change, when health is perfect, or when everything is in its place. But the peace Jesus spoke of does not depend on the world. It is prior to the world, it is above the world, it is immune to what happens in the world. True peace is an internal state that arises from a single cause, a consciousness centered in God. It is not obtained by struggling, by thinking more, or by controlling the details. It is revealed when the mind stops resisting what is and surrenders with trust to the principle that holds everything together. When God is first, peace is not a goal, it is a natural fruit. Just as the tree does not force its fruit but produces it by law when it is well rooted, the mind also bears its noblest fruit, peace, when it is rooted in truth. And what is the truth? That God is present, that the source has not withdrawn, that the Spirit reigns, that we are not alone or abandoned in a hostile universe. This understanding, held steadily, transforms mental noise into clarity, conflict into harmony, tension into inner rest. Peace does not come as a response to what happens, but as a reflection of how one thinks. A fragmented consciousness, divided between fear and faith, between the desire to control and the longing to surrender, cannot be peace, because peace only dwells in the one. Where there is unity with God, there is rest. Where there is conscious presence of good, fear ceases. The world may change and weep, but if your axis is firm, if you have placed the Spirit first, nothing that moves will be able to move you. Nothing external will be able to alter your center, because you no longer depend on the effects but dwell in the cause. And that cause is unchanging, that cause is God, that cause is you when you remember what you are. When a soul has tasted this peace, it no longer wants to return to the old world of anxiety. Not because life has become perfect, but because it has discovered that peace does not need everything to change. It only needs you to change your axis, and that axis is God. Praying is not asking for peace, it is aligning with it, it is remembering it, it is allowing it to take the place that noise had usurped. Breathe, be still, and repeat. The peace of God is in me. I do not need to fabricate it, only to allow it. I do not need to resolve everything, only to return to the axis and from there act. Peace is not passivity, it is inner power. Peace is not the absence of movement, it is action from harmony. It is thought without contradiction. It is heart without defense. And the most wonderful thing is that this peace is contagious. It radiates, blesses, transforms. A soul at peace illuminates a home. A mind at peace orders a business. A heart at peace disarms a conflict, because peace is not a personal emotion. It is a spiritual vibration that penetrates every circumstance. And this only happens when God has been placed first. Do not wait for everything to be perfect to rest. Rest now, and allow everything else to find its order from that rest. Jesus did not promise a life without challenges. He promised a peace that surpasses them, a peace that does not come from the world and that the world cannot take away. That peace is in you now, and when you make it a priority, when you recognize it as a sign of being centered in God, then you know that everything else is already on its way. Chapter 9. Constant Sustenance, How Spiritual Priority Attracts All That Is Needed. Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of much more value than they? Jesus of Nazareth. One of the deepest errors sown by the separated human consciousness is the belief that sustenance depends on solitary effort, exact calculation, hoarding, or a changing economy. But the Master was clear. It is not worry that feeds the soul, but trust in an invisible source that has already provided everything from the beginning. True sustenance does not come from the outside. It does not come from salary, position, or human connections. It is drawn by the consciousness aligned with the law. And the law responds when God is placed first. When Jesus spoke of the kingdom, he was not speaking of abstract ideas. He was speaking of a spiritual structure of constant provision that is only activated when the soul recognizes its sources first. And that source does not fluctuate, does not enter into crisis, does not respond to collective panic. It is eternal, inexhaustible, present, and it is within you. When he said, "Seek first the kingdom, and all these things will be added to you," Jesus was not promising isolated miracles. He was revealing a causal law. When God is a priority, the flow of everything needed begins to manifest without friction, because the soul no longer vibrates from scarcity, but from the certainty that everything is contained within the source. Concern for sustenance is nothing more than a sign that the lower self has tried to take the place of God. It has tried to guarantee, by its own means, what only the divine consciousness can provide with harmony. And that attempt, though well-intentioned, produces weariness, anguish, and dissatisfaction because the soul was created to trust, not to survive. It was designed to express, not to beg. It was called to manifest, not to compete. God is abundance organized, and that organization only reflects in practical life when the spiritual priority is firm, non-negotiable, and not occasional. Many pray for sustenance but continue to put fear first. They affirm provision but decide from doubt. They ask for abundance but think from lack and become frustrated, not knowing that the law does not respond to words but to inner vibration. Sustenance does not come because it is begged for. It comes because permission is given for the spirit to flow, and that permission is granted when the soul stops demanding and begins to remember. Remember that it is not work that feeds but God. It is not appearance that sustains but God. It is not ability or luck that provides, but God. And when God is placed first in thought, intention, and action, everything else by law aligns. Spiritual priority is not idealism, it is practical wisdom. It is understanding that there is nothing more urgent than returning to the center, that no bill, no debt, no fear has more power than the source. Test it out. Before resolving, pray. Before calculating, silence. Before responding to the appearance of lack, remember, God is my sustenance. I lack nothing. I fear not the future. I am not guided by what I see, but by what I know. And I know that good is already on its way because it is already in God, and God is in me. And then act. Work if necessary, decide with wisdom. Do your part externally, but do it from inner order, not from urgency. Because the soul that has placed God first no longer despairs. It knows that sustenance is a reflection, not a reward. It is the result of the axis, not of effort. It is the sign that the law is active and that consciousness has remembered its true place. And in that place, where everything begins with God, abundance is no longer a promise. It is a constant presence. Chapter 10. Relationships in Harmony. Loving from unity with God, not from lack. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Jesus of Nazareth. Every human relationship is a reflection of the inner relationship. Love is not given from the outside in, it is given from the inside out. And if the soul has not learned to live in unity with God, if it has not placed the Spirit first as its center and source, then every attempt to love becomes contaminated with need, expectation, and fear. And love, when born from lack, turns into dependence, attachment, or conflict. Jesus did not teach sentimental or conditional love. He taught a love rooted in fullness, a love that does not seek to fill a void, but to share a wholeness. That is why the commandment does not begin with loving your neighbor. It begins with loving God. Because only when God is first does love become true. And only when the soul recognizes itself as loved by its source can it love without demands, without manipulation, without fear. The common mistake is trying to fix relationships without first correcting the consciousness. seeking reconciliation from a wounded mind, asking for harmony while holding on to judgment, longing for understanding while harboring resentment. And so what should be a space for growth and expansion becomes a battleground. Not because the other is the enemy, but because the ego still takes first place. And where the ego rules, love cannot blossom. Placing God first in a relationship means placing truth above fleeting emotion, forgiveness above the wound, spiritual vision above personal history. It means recognizing that you are not here for someone to complete you, but to express, together with others, the wholeness that you already are in God. And this is not a utopia, it is a real practice, a radical transformation in how we see the other, not as a threat, not as possession, not as a reflection of our lack, but as a companion in awakening, as a mirror for the soul, as a sacred opportunity to practice the love that God has already placed within you. When a relationship is not flowing, do not begin by pointing outward. Return to the altar of your mind. Remember who is first. Remember that only true love, the love that is born in God, can sustain, guide, and heal. And that love is not weak, it is firm, it is wise. It knows when to say yes, but also when to say no. It knows when to unite, but also when to let go. It knows how to stay when there is growth and how to withdraw when there is violence. Because loving from unity with God is also loving with clarity. The soul that has placed God first in its heart no longer begs for affection, no longer negotiates its peace for approval, no longer deforms itself to fit in. It loves without fear, because it knows that its true source of love is not another human being, but the spirit that inhabits it. And so by releasing demands, by freeing the other from the burden of making me happy, love is purified. It becomes light. It becomes a gift, not a transaction. It becomes a river, not a chain. Make it a habit before speaking with those you love, before correcting, explaining, or asking. Silence yourself within and declare, God is first in this relationship. Not the ego, not the past, not the need. From eternal love I choose to look. From truth I choose to listen, and from unity I choose to act. And you will see how what seemed complex becomes clear. What was broken begins to heal, and what was not true simply dissolves without drama. Because when God is the center of a relationship, there is no struggle to control. There is only a sincere desire to expand good, and where good expands, the soul finds rest. Harmony among human beings is not a rare miracle. It is the inevitable result of a consciousness that has placed love with a capital L as its priority. And that love is God first, always. Chapter 11. Time aligns as life organizes when the soul is ordered. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Jesus of Nazareth. One of the great modern evils is the constant feeling of not having enough time. We live in a rush, postponing, fragmenting the soul between urgencies, endless to-do lists, clocks, and unforgiving calendars. The mind fills with anxiety, the body tires, priorities dissolve, and yet the most important things are always left for later. Silence, prayer, the consciousness of God. Why does it seem that time escapes us? Why does the day never seem enough? Why do we feel like we're always running late, even when we are on time? The answer is not in the clock, but in the consciousness. The problem is not time, it is inner disorder. And when the soul is disordered, life becomes misaligned. But when the soul is ordered, when it places God first, time itself reorganizes. The misaligned mind lives divided between the past and the future, filled with guilt for what was and fear for what might be. In that division, the present, the only point of power, gets lost. And without inner presence, there is no outer direction. Time is not linear when lived from the spirit. Time responds to consciousness and aligns with the one who lives in the eternal now. Jesus never rushed, and yet he fulfilled his mission in perfect harmony. He didn't live with anxiety, didn't try to control the course of events. He lived in constant communion with the principle, and from there, every step had its moment, every word had its power, every encounter had its purpose. This is what happens when God is first in consciousness. The soul enters a different frequency, one that does not respond to human time, but to divine intelligence, which organizes everything harmoniously. Then opportunities arise exactly when they are needed. People come without being sought. Answers appear without being forced. And the soul, instead of chasing time, begins to walk within real time, the time of God. This is not passivity, it is not inaction, it is action from the center, movement with direction. It is stopping the push and starting to allow. When living from the ego, the day is full, but the heart is empty. When living from God, the day is abundant and the heart is at peace. It is not an illusion. Those who put God first, who begin their day in inner silence, who consult the Spirit before deciding, discover that time stretches, paths open, delays transform into synchronicities. Because time does not rule the aligned soul organizes time. Want to see this law in action? Start with the small things. Dedicate the first minutes of the day, not to urgency, but to presence. Before looking at the clock, look inward. Before planning, pray. Before running off, remember God first, and from Him order will come. And watch, chaos begins to dissolve. The pieces fit. What seemed impossible becomes simple because when the soul aligns, life organizes itself. When consciousness calms, time becomes a friend. This is the secret the world has forgotten. It's not about managing time. It's about consecrating it. It's not about running faster. It's about walking in harmony with the greater plan. Time, well understood, is just a way that God manifests, and those who live with God at the center live in just the right time, neither before nor after, but exactly when it should be. Then there is no guilt for the past, nor anxiety for the future. Only a quiet certainty. I am where I need to be, doing what I need to do, and what has not yet come will come at the exact moment because the life that guides me has already planned it all. And that certainty does not come from the calendar, the clock, or control. It comes from a soul that has made this single, powerful decision, to put God first. Chapter 12, Revealed Purpose. When God occupies the center, everything else finds its place. For this I was born, and for this I have come into the world. Jesus of Nazareth. The human soul, even amid all its searches, longs for one thing, meaning. It doesn't just want to live, it wants to understand why it lives. It is not enough to exist. There is a silent urgency that whispers from deep within, "What is my purpose? What have I come here to do?" And so many begin a path of external searching, processions, titles, missions, causes. Some find it partially, others believe they have found it and then lose it. But the truth is that no true purpose can be revealed without first ordering the consciousness. And consciousness is only ordered when God occupies the center. Purpose is not something invented. It is not a goal defined rationally or a role chosen like a suit. Purpose is a revelation, a flame that ignites when the soul has been purified of distractions, masks, and foreign ambitions. And that purification begins with one single decision, to give God the place He deserves. When the Spirit is first, everything else begins to find its place. Confusion dissipates, the voices of the world quiet down, haste relinquishes its throne, and in that fertile silence, something emerges from deep within. A soft but unshakable certainty, a direction that does not come from analysis, but from the soul itself. For this I was born. Purpose doesn't always shout, sometimes it whispers, sometimes it manifests in small hints, repeated affinities, an unmistakable peace when doing a certain task. But what sets it apart from any other path is that it doesn't drain, it renews, it doesn't demand, it expands. It doesn't trap, it frees. Jesus never spoke of purpose as a burden. He lived it as expression. He was not seeking to be someone. He was manifesting what he already was, because he knew where he came from and where he was going. And that knowledge did not come from study, but from his perfect union with the Father. That's why he said, "I and the Father are one." And from that humility, every word, every step, every gesture flowed naturally as the fulfillment of his purpose. This is what happens when God is put first. Purpose is not sought, it is remembered. It is not manufactured, it is allowed. It is not conquered, it is embodied. The soul stops copying foreign paths, comparing itself, wondering if it is doing the right thing because it no longer acts from the small I, but from the I am that dwells at its center. Then purpose may be grand in the eyes of the world, or go unnoticed, but it doesn't matter because it is not measured by recognition, but by alignment. And what is aligned is already fulfilling its reason for being. Make it a habit. Before deciding what to do with your life, ask first, who occupies the center of my consciousness? If it is fear, you will be pursuing security. If it is ambition, you will be pursuing approval. If it is comparison, you will be running after what doesn't belong to you. But if it is God, then whatever you do will be an expression of your truth. And that truth needs no justification. It only needs to be lived. Your purpose is not something you need to invent with anguish. It is a frequency that reveals itself when everything else has been silenced. It is a music that already plays within you, but can only be heard when God is the conductor. And once you hear that melody, you can no longer return to the noise. You can no longer settle for living by inertia. You can no longer ignore the fire that has awakened because the soul that has put God first no longer needs to search outside. It has found its reason for being within. And from there, everything falls into place. Everything makes sense. Everything blossoms effortlessly. Chapter 13, Inner Obedience. Stopping resistance is beginning to receive. He who has my commandments and keeps them, it is he who loves me, and I will manifest myself to him. Jesus of Nazareth. In the language of the Spirit, obedience is not submitting to an external will. It is not obeying orders out of fear, nor forcing external behavior to comply with rigid rules. To obey in the consciousness of the kingdom is to align oneself internally with the law of good. It is to stop resisting the divine direction that already flows in the soul and allow it to occupy the place it deserves, the first place. Resistance does not always show itself as open rebellion. Often it disguises itself as control, excessive analysis, the desire to have guarantees before taking a step, or clinging to old beliefs and emotions that no longer serve, to paths that the heart knows are not right. And all that resistance, although it may seem protective, is the barrier preventing us from receiving what the Spirit wants to deliver, because God is always giving good. The law is always flowing, the law is always active, but it cannot force its way into a soul that insists on directing from the ego. Inner obedience is not blind. It is intelligent, it is profound. It is an act of sacred humility that says, I don't need to understand everything to trust. I don't need to have the complete map to move forward. If God is first in my consciousness, then his direction is secure and my surrender is wise. Jesus himself lived it. The Master did not act out of personal will. He did not seek fame, approval, or results. His power came from his perfect obedience to the Spirit, and that obedience was not weakness. It was spiritual authority, because those who have surrendered to the higher law can walk with power over the waters of life. Resistance, on the other hand, wears us down. It makes the path feel hard, the decisions heavy, and the days pass without clear direction, because those who do not obey the Spirit obey the world, and the world changes, demands, and confuses. But the Spirit guides with peace, guides with certainty, guides with love when the soul surrenders inwardly, when it stops fighting, justifying, or negotiating with the voice of God. Then the channel of reception is opened. What seemed blocked is freed. What wasn't coming arrives. What hurt heals because there is no more interference. There are no longer two wills in conflict. There is only one mind, one law, one direction, the will of God, and the soul unified with him. This obedience is not passive. It is an active, constant, loving act. It is saying at every moment, your will be done in me. Not out of fear, but because I know your will is good. Not out of resignation, but because I trust your wisdom more than my limited ideas. And from that surrender, life begins to organize itself effortlessly. The soul no longer wears itself out pushing doors that won't open. It does not blame itself for not understanding the why of each thing. It simply listens, follows, obeys, and receives. Try this. When you feel confused, don't search for more answers. Search for inner obedience. When you feel resistance, don't blame yourself. Just recognize, I am trying to direct something that the Spirit already knows how to resolve. And then release, not adrift, but to the center, not by chance, but to the law, and say, goodness guides me, and I obey with joy. Because resistance takes me away, but obedience connects me to wholeness. And step by step, life stops being a struggle and becomes a clear current. Because true obedience is not slavery, it is inner freedom. And when the soul stops resisting, it is finally ready to receive. Chapter 14. God is not part of life, he is life, and everything else is added by law. In him we live and move and have our being. Acts 5:28. The great spiritual misunderstanding of humanity is not that we don't believe in God, but that we relegate him to a part of our life, as if the Spirit were a room we enter only on Sundays, or a resource we turn to in times of crisis. But this fragmented view cannot generate peace, abundance, or true purpose, because God is not a portion of existence. God is existence itself. He is not another element on the life's board. He is the entire board, the background, the origin, the substance of everything. The mistake is in separating my spiritual life from other aspects: work, relationships, finances, the body, plans. And so the soul is divided, consciousness weakens, and the spirit loses its axis in the mind of man, though in reality it has never moved. What moves is the attention, what shifts is the priority. Jesus did not come to teach you how to include God in your activities. He came to teach you that your whole life is spiritual, and only when you recognize God as life itself does everything else fall into place, not as an occasional miracle, but as the result of a living, exact, and eternal law. When God is placed first, it's not like putting a check mark on a list of priorities. 1. God. 2. Family. 3. Work. 4. Health. 5. Finances. No, God is the foundation that sustains everything else. He is the field where all the seeds grow. He is the ocean from which all forms emerge and to which they return. If that root is not nourished, the tree does not bear fruit. God is not part of your financial life. He is the source of everything in it. God is not part of your health. He is the intelligence that organizes your cells. God is not part of your relationship. He is the love that unites in harmony and truth. God is not part of your decisions. He is the wisdom that inspires them from above. And when you live from this vision, not as a concept but as a certainty, then everything that seemed complex begins to simplify. The burdens lighten, problems change their face, because you are no longer resolving from separate parts, but living from the unique and total center. This is the great transformation, to move from living a fragmented life to living a unified life, where each part expresses the whole, and the whole is God. That is why Jesus said, "Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you." He didn't say some, or just the spiritual ones. He said all, because all that is true, all that is necessary, all that is noble and good flows from the same root, and that root is invisible but powerful. It cannot be touched, but it can be felt. It cannot be bought, but it sustains real wealth. It is not confined to temples, because it dwells in the heart of the awakened soul. Make it a habit. When you start the day, don't ask, "Where can I include God today?" Instead ask, "How can I remember that everything I do today is in God, with God, from God?" And then every action, even if it seems common, becomes sacred. Every decision is imbued with clarity. Every relationship reflects truth, and what was once considered material becomes an extension of the Spirit. Thus the law is fulfilled. God first, and everything else falls into place. God at the center, and everything else turns in harmony. God as life, and life becomes full, prosperous, and guided. There are no exceptions. There is no circumstance that does not respond to this order, because when we recognize that God is not part of life, but life itself, the soul finally rests, and in resting, it receives. And in receiving, it gives, and in giving, it returns to the source from which everything comes. Chapter 15, Living in Priority. The eternal secret is not lost, only forgotten. But one thing is necessary, and Mary has chosen the better part, which will not be taken from her. Jesus of Nazareth. The human soul is not lost, it is asleep, and the secret it seeks has not disappeared. It has only been buried under layers of noise, haste, ego, and forgetfulness. That secret, the oldest yet most relevant, has been repeated, whispered, and written in all languages, but it is only revealed to those who are willing to live in priority. And that priority is not a concept, it is a practice, a daily decision, a re-education of the soul to return to the original axis, God first. From the beginning, all authentic spiritual teachings have pointed to this single point, that the cause of all fullness, peace, direction, healing, and prosperity is not found in form, accumulation, or external approval, but in the correct relationship with the source. And that relationship only flourishes when it is given the first place, the center, the primacy in consciousness. Mary understood this, but Martha did not. One was busy with many things, believing that doing was the most important. The other sat at the feet of the Master, knowing that all right action springs first from being in order. And Jesus did not correct her. He validated her. Mary has chosen the better part, and it will not be taken from her. Because everything that comes from spiritual priority is eternal, while what arises from confusion is transient, even if it seems urgent. Living in priority does not mean neglecting your responsibilities. It means performing them from another frequency. It means waking up in the morning and remembering that your first move is not to look at the clock, but to look within. It is not about rushing after duty, but first aligning with being. It is not planning the day from fear, but from certainty. If God is first, everything else will be ordered. This principle, repeated in all sacred scriptures, does not need to be reinvented. It just needs to be remembered. And living it is coming back home. It is turning off the noise of the world without disconnecting from it. It is being in the world but not of the world. It is acting without anxiety, deciding without fragmentation, giving without expecting, and receiving without guilt. Living in priority is knowing that when a problem arises, the solution does not begin externally, but in returning to the center. If something hurts, the relief does not come from drama, but from sitting in silence with God first and then acting. The secret is not in techniques or methods that change with the times. It is in what does not change. The presence, the eternal love, the truth that already is, even though the world has forgotten it. The soul that remembers this priority, even if it doesn't yet know how things will be resolved externally, lives with a peace that doesn't need explanation, because it has already chosen the better part, and that part will not be taken from it. You have read, you have searched, you have longed for answers, and now you have them, not in the new, but in the eternal. God is first, and everything else without exception is added. There is no other path, no other secret, no other power. And when the soul decides to live it, not just as a belief, but as an embodied practice, then the invisible becomes form, chaos becomes order, and life, all of life, becomes a constant reflection of the love that created everything, because living in priority is not a spiritual option. It is the key that opens all doors. And that key has always been in your hand. It just needed to be remembered.